January 15th, 2026. I'm Mike Kelly, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners for Johnson County, Kansas. We're here for a committee of the whole session today. And I'll ask the clerk at this time to call the roll of the elected.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner Brewer.
Brewer here.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
Chairman Kelly.
I am here as well. All are present. Two topics today. The first is the Johnson County Rural Comprehensive Plan regarding the Comprehensive Arterial Road Network Plan, and then thereafter the conversation regarding zoning boards. So with us today are Jay Leipzig, Sean Penley, and Jeffrey Vos, Planning, Housing, Community Development. We're going to hear a presentation first regarding the CARNIP program and housing types within unincorporated Johnson County. I'll let you do some table setting. We'll have an opportunity for discussion and direction on that item, and then we'll discuss zoning boards. So without further ado, Mr. Leipzig.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Leipzig, Planning, Housing, Community Development Director. Can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Last time I remember I had issues with this particular microphone, so I want to make sure I'm close enough to it. As the Chairman just mentioned, I have with me today Sean Penley, our Deputy Director of Planning, is here, as well as Jeffrey Vos, is our Engineering Manager in Public Works. We also have Kip Strauss, who's the Principal at HNTB, is on the line with us remotely today. Kip was the primary author of the Transportation Connection Plan, which is all related to this, our CARNIP discussion today. CARNIP is the Comprehensive Arterial Road Network Plan, or CARNIP, and this is going to talk a little bit about the purpose and objectives. And you've heard this several times, I think, at least probably once when a planning item is presented to you, we typically will reference CARNIP or some reference to that or some aspect of it when staff is presenting the reports to you. The CARNIP, or the Comprehensive Arterial Road Network Plan, was adopted in 1999 as part of the Comprehensive Plan as a plan for future roadways in southern and western Johnson County. CARNIP recommends the development of both major and minor systems of routes, including parkways and boulevards that interconnect the counties and the regional roadway network. CARNIP includes recommendations for typical roadway design standards, as well as strategies for ensuring that adequate rights-of-way will be available for future needed roadway improvements, and provides the basis for access management for your arterial roads. So that's the introduction to CARNIP. The other thing I wanted to point out is in your packet today, there's also a staff report that was included, as well as the PowerPoint. And the request today is that if you accept the recommendation is move forward and have this before the Board of County Commissioners next week, which will be January 22nd, before you for action. So we're going to tag team this approach this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean Penley that's going to talk about some of the details involved in CARNIP.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Penley with Planning staff. So I'll go through the details and an overview of CARNIP, the Comprehensive Arterial Road Network Plan, and how it ties into the county zoning regulations. Excuse me. Essentially what CARNIP is it's a future transportation plan for arterial roads in the unincorporated area. This map here on this slide shows the current adopted CARNIP map. This was the most recent version of this was adopted in 2015, as Jay mentioned. So it's been just over 10 years since we've had the last update to this. What is CARNIP? So CARNIP is adopted as part of the Rural Comprehensive Plan. It's included in Chapter 4, the transportation section of the comp plan. And it's really, the intent is for it to identify policies for managing access on arterial roads in the unincorporated area. And another important element of this is to inform the public about arterial road types and access. This is important with how it ties into the zoning regulations because this plan sets the policies for access management on those arterial roads so that for future property owners that are intending to subdivide their property or build on these arterial roads, they know what limits there are on access. There's requirements in our zoning regulations for spacing of driveways and right-of-way. So that's a big part of this and why it's important. And so again, this is just to address the unincorporated area. The cities have their own jurisdiction for access management on arterial roads, so we're only talking about the unincorporated area. What CARNIP is not is, this is not a construction document, it's not a schedule for construction, it's not an alignment study for any particular arterial route, and it does not include any specific roadway design plans. Again, it's a future plan for access on these arterial roads. And so why do we need to update CARNIP now? This, as we mentioned the last time, it's been over 10 years since we've updated this, and there's been a lot that's happened in the last 10 years. Obviously, with the former Sunflower Army ammunition plant and annexation into DeSoto, the Astra Enterprise Park has, and the development within that has changed a lot in terms of the transportation and roadway infrastructure in the west area of the county. And so this is really important to reevaluate those connections in that area and the surrounding area. And so as a result of those annexations and development in DeSoto, including the Astra Enterprise Park, there is a need to update CARNIP and plan for future transportation connections in the surrounding area. So the basis of this recommendations, the update, come from the Transportation Connection Plan. As Jay mentioned, in last year, the department conducted a study in coordination with the city of DeSoto and KDOT, known as the Southwest Area Transportation Connection Plan, and Public Works presented those recommendations in June of 2025. And the scope was to look at evaluating connections surrounding the Astra Enterprise Park and basically reconnecting arterial streets through that area. And I'll try to go through each one of these areas as I'm pointing out these different items. So one of the parts of the scope initially was to reconnect the Astra Enterprise Park, now that that's developing, to designate a north-south corridor through the Astra Enterprise Park. Now that, again, it's opening up. Previously, as the Sunflower Army ammunition plan, there was no connections through here. Now that it's being developed, that does change everything in terms of transportation through the area. We also wanted to review the Kill Creek route for the north and south alignment through that area to the east of the Astra Enterprise Park, and review the 111th Street route connecting through east-west route, and also to review the surrounding area. There are effects as traffic increases, it does affect the surrounding area. So that's all part of the scope. That was part of the Transportation Connection Plan, if you recall. Sure. So as part of that Transportation Connection Plan, as Jay mentioned, the consultant that this county worked with was HNTB, and they provided the recommendations, and that study was completed last year. The core team was the City of DeSoto, Johnson County, and KDOT. In addition, on the technical committee, we coordinated with a number of jurisdictions, including the cities of Edgerton, Gardner, Olathe, Eudora, Douglas County, MARC, the Mid-America Regional Council, Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Organization, Johnson County Park and Recreation, just to name a few. Those are stakeholders for regional transportation efforts in the area. So following completion of the Transportation Connection Plan, the next step was to look at how we would apply those recommendations to our CARNIP map to address future planning for arterial roads in the unincorporated area. So again, the findings were to essentially address reconnection for arterial roads throughout the area surrounding the Astra Enterprise Park. And I'll go through these one by one here, identifying these, looking at reconnecting the east-west routes through the Astra Enterprise Park. That is 119th Street, 127th Street, and 135th Street. And that's the areas to the west. In addition, we're looking at 127th Street and 135th Street, and also the north-south corridor for Evening Star and Edgerton Road from K10 to 159th Street. There are different designations for these routes that I'll talk about in a minute between type 1, 2, and 3, and they depend on the capacity of those roads. But those were identified in this. We also were looking again at the Kill Creek Road alignment. One of the areas we wanted to address was a previous recommendation for an alignment along Kill Creek and just to the west of Kill Creek. We are recommending to delete that recommendation and instead stay with the current alignment of Kill Creek Road and 115th Street and Waverly Road. And those would be designated as a type 2 two-lane road. We'll talk about those details in a minute as well. In addition, there was area for 111th Street to affirm that corridor. That east route is important through this area. So, and we are recommending keeping that alignment, but lowering the designation to a type 2 two-lane road, instead of what was previously recommended for a 4-lane route. And that's again because of some of the capacity and traffic through that area. In addition, there were several other minor recommendations for other updates to the Carnap map affecting surrounding areas, including Four Corners Road, Moonlight Road, several changes to 143rd Street, which basically just changed some of the designations for the type 2 road, and also Dilly Road and 151st Street. Those are all identified, and as a result of the Transportation Connection Plan, we are recommending updates to the Carnap map. Those are just kind of high-level overviews of some of the streets that are affected. So these are mostly areas to the west of the county surrounding Astor Enterprise Park. So this map shows the proposed updates to the Carnap routes. It's hard to read at this scale here, but the legend identifies the different road types. There's generally 3 types: Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. The Type 1 routes are identified as gray. These are these lighter weight roads that have lower traffic capacity. Type 2 are identified in the purple, a little bit higher capacity arterial roads. And then Type 3 are identified in green. They're the highest capacity routes with the most traffic capacity. And within each one of these, there are 2 general designations, one for either a 2-lane or a 4-lane road, and it depends on the capacity of traffic along those routes, and those are all identified specifically in the Transportation Connection Plan. So this proposed update to Carnap, these changes to the different routes here, we're all following the recommendations from the Transportation Connection Plan with 2 exceptions. 119th Street, we were recommending a connection through there on the west side of Astor Enterprise Park, but following discussion with Johnson County Park and Recreation District, there were some concerns with the connection in that area west of Astor Enterprise Park due to future plans for a parkland dedication and future parkland development that may impact that area. So they requested to have that connection removed. Staff reviewed that and agreed that that made sense, and the Planning Commission also agreed with that. The other change was for Edgerton Road. There was a lot of discussion at the public hearing in the Planning Commission regarding that. Several members of the public spoke on that route specifically, and they had concerns with the designation for a Type 3 4-lane road. And so following discussion, the Planning Commission did recommend a change to that and designated it Type 3 2-lane road. So they downgraded that slightly. We'll talk about the recommendations in a minute, but generally staff was supportive of that change because it's still designated as a Type 3 route. It is still high traffic, and we do still have the required street driveway spacings and street spacing as required by the regulations. So we felt that that was appropriate for that route, and we did not oppose that change. One last graphic I'll show here. This is a general roadway schematic showing the differences between the Type 1, 2, and 3 routes for Carnap. This is already adopted as part of our comprehensive plan in the transportation section. And what this is showing here is the Type 1 routes are in the top, going down to a Type 3 in the bottom. And so it's illustrating the difference. Type 1 are the least restrictive, and they would allow for, they have the lowest capacity of traffic and the lowest volume of traffic on arterial roads. So they have the least amount of restrictions. Driveway spacing can be closer, street spacing may be closer, and there's less right-of-way required. As you go into a higher capacity roads to a Type 2 and a Type 3, they become more restrictive. More right-of-way is required, more spacing, greater spacing is required between driveways and streets because you have higher traffic volume on those streets. Therefore, we recommend greater spacing between driveways. And that's what this is illustrating here. I know you can't read the details for the right-of-way sections and how much dimensions are required, but what this is illustrating is, and why it's important is, this ties into our zoning regulations. We apply these recommendations depending on whether you're a type 1, 2, or 3 route. That governs how any future subdivision or development along arterial roads will dictate how much right-of-way is needed at the time of that development and how much spacing is required for any new driveways accessing those routes. So that's just a quick schematic showing that. We'd be happy to answer any of the details, any questions you have. But first, I'd like to turn it back over to Jay to talk about the other element of this update to our comprehensive plan for the housing types. And then we'll talk about the Planning Commission recommendations for both Carnap and housing after this.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. So I'm going to switch gears slightly and talk a little bit about some minor changes we were proposing for our comprehensive plan in Chapter 2 regarding housing types, the unincorporated area. And essentially what this does really is just provide some additional flexibility so that there's new and unique housing types that could be compatible with development or adjacent cities. And so before it was very clear that you couldn't, there was zero flexibility in terms of infrastructure and when that was in place. So we wanted to create some more kind of open, flexible statements so that if new ideas come forward for additional housing types, for example, affordable housing, or in some cases, having units on septic systems rather than requiring sewers every single time, we wanted to have that flexibility. So these statements are related to that. In Chapter 2, amendments intended to provide guidance for future discussions and opportunities, new information, housing choices that are part of our rural comprehensive plan in Chapter 2, and the housing types generally limited to rural and low density residential due to limited availability of infrastructure. The key to that is having the infrastructure in place. That's kind of the first rule of housing development and development in general, is ensuring that the infrastructure is in place before the other housing types or whatever uses are put in place. I also want to make sure that the compatible growth with nearby city plans served by adequate infrastructure, and that also includes connectivity, which goes back to some of the Carnap ideas that we were talking about previously, and also accessory dwelling units, including purpose and intent and appearance standards to be consistent with zoning regulations. This is something that's due as accessory dwelling units have become more popular. We wanted to have some particular language in our comprehensive plan in this regard as well. So just a quick overview in terms of the comprehensive plan amendments, the review schedule. As we mentioned a couple times in the presentation already, this item was the Transportation Connection Plan was originally presented on June 24th during a study update to the Board of County Commissioners that was done by Brian Pedig, our former Public Works Director. And then August 26th, the draft comprehensive plan update was presented to the Planning Commission, and then it also included the Carnap recommendations. September 23rd, we had a hearing on this item before our Planning Commission. That hearing, we had several speakers that spoke that evening, so we continued the hearing until October 28th before the Planning Commission and regarding the recommendations for Carnap. And so, which brings me forward to today, January 15th, for our Committee of the Whole, when this item is presented to you. And then if you deem it appropriate and you choose to move forward, we will have this before you January 22nd for final review by the Board of County Commissioners. So just a quick overview again, a quick update on the Planning Commission recommendations. The Planning Commission recommended unanimously for the Transportation Connection Plan recommendations, except that the PC recommends designating Edgerton Road as a Type 3 two-lane Carnap route from 143rd Street to 215th Street instead of a Type 3 four-lane Carnap route. Staff is not opposed to this recommendation. There were several members in the audience of the public hearing that spoke on that particular item. Staff does not oppose that recommendation because really what is somewhat ironic about Carnop is if you want to protect the rural character, the higher street designation actually protects the rural character more than the lower street designation because of the curb cuts and the driveway access. So the greater the classification for the road, the less curb cuts you would have off of that road. And if you think if you think of areas where there are curb cuts, one right after the other every 300 feet, that can be fairly frustrating, especially when you're trying to travel through. And so really the purpose of Carnop, and this is just kind of a common sense approach, is really to keep that traffic moving, being able to drive through without being hindered by unnecessary curb cuts and additional stoppages. So that's why it's important. That's why it's really a critical component of infrastructure development, and especially rural development or development that's adjacent to the cities and some of our surrounding areas. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Planning Commission also recommended an alternative to Edgerton Road as the north-south Type 3 Carnop route connecting to Ad Ester Park and for Carnop and the Northwest Corridor. Staff does not support this recommendation because we believe that this is premature at this point. This is something that I think a better approach long-term would be to work with Kansas Department of Transportation to look at what some other alternative routes might be out there. And this is a long-term approach, and that was part of the reason why staff was not supportive of that, because it's something that would be a budget item for the future and allocating funds down the road. And at this point, there's too much uncertainty in terms of what that particular route might be. And Jeff can speak to that probably more intelligently than I can, and also Kip Strauss. But it really is, it's that horizon to make a decision like that. It could be at least 7 or 8 years from this point before we even have enough data and traffic counts to be able to look at that intelligently. So that's why that item was not supported by staff. And then the last item would be to recommending adopting the housing policy additions that are proposed by staff as recommended by the Planning Commission as well. So with that, I will open up for any questions you might have. And I realize they're two fairly different topics.
Yeah.
But we're open for questions.
So let's do that. Let's divide, if that's okay with the board, let's divide to roadways and traffic first, and then we'll get into housing just for sake of clarity of the discussion. Is that fair enough? Let me just start with some level setting questions because it might help guide. First of all, arterial roads. When somebody's talking about an arterial road, what does that mean as opposed to a residential street?
Jeff Bose from Public Works. So the arterial road network and then incorporated is our section line roads. Those are our every mile road.
Now you are.
Okay. Okay. I hit the button. So the arterial road network in the unincorporated would be our section line road network. That's every mile. Those are the streets that carry the majority of the traffic through. When you get to the collectors and the local roads, those are like the subdivision roads that you see in urban areas. So as that road network gets more defined, the speeds go up on those arterials. It has a lot more capacity. The collector would be that middle ground of collecting several subdivisions together, and then you have the local roads that are in the subdivisions, which are typically the lowest capacity and the slowest speeds.
So we're talking about the arterial roads being the highest capacity, the through lanes more than a mile apart, that's supposed to carry traffic through the area as opposed to traditional stop and go traffic.
Yes.
And this being a planning process, Mr. Leipzig, you had mentioned that this doesn't have construction plans or timelines with them. For any of these particular roadways, what are we talking about in terms of actual enhancements into the future? Are we in some cases talking a decade or more long process? What does that really look like?
Yes, none of these are under design right now. They're not budgeted. So we are looking, the soonest we could maybe get one ready if needed would be 3 to 5 years. But we really don't have the traffic yet. I mean, this is projecting traffic out 25 plus years. So these are definitely more long-term horizon projects at some point. Even the connections into the Sunflower Plan are going to be dependent on when DeSoto and AEP do the need to do those improvements. So there is no real timeline on these at all right now.
Okay. When we're talking about the different types of roadways, type 1, 2, 3, whether they be 4 lanes or 2 lanes, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the right-of-way that's required for those different types is the same regardless if it's 2 lanes or 4 lanes.
Within each type, correct.
Right. So whether you have 2 lanes or 4 lanes on a type 3, you're talking about the same 200 feet of right-of-way.
Correct.
Okay. And then I had one other question in terms of if a city continues to expand. We've seen great expansion by the city of DeSoto recently, right? There's a history of expansion in cities throughout Johnson County. How does this plan, particularly, and I'm just talking about roadways as opposed to housing at this point, how does this plan either guide, preclude, prohibit, or is it impacted, or does this plan preclude a city if they were to annex in a piece of roadway of they choosing the designation of an arterial road? How does that process play out?
Typically, as soon as the city annexes a road, it becomes their road and out of the unincorporated jurisdiction. So a little bit nuanced on it is that what the county has chosen to designate and enforce for that type will help a city be able to put a road in at a higher capacity, but they could choose not to. So if we raise a designation and preserve more right-of-way and more capacity, that gives the cities more options, but it doesn't preclude them from going however they choose to go.
And similarly, if traffic counts were to indicate the need within a certain type at some point in the future to go from a 2-lane or to a 3-lane or 4-lane, that's possible regardless of the plan.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Commissioner, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jay.
What I was going to mention too is the type of, oftentimes the roadway improvements are precipitated by the development. So as an extreme example, something like a Panasonic, for example, is contemplated or platted, there's always a traffic study and the traffic models are evaluated to look at the impact on local roads. So there's always CARNIP, but there's, as kind of laying out that designation, but as development comes forward that's kind of an extreme example, that can be reviewed, and that's always part of our review process anyways, looking at the traffic counts or the impact of traffic on the particular, or the development, and how that would the existing roads would be able to accommodate that traffic.
Thank you. Commissioner Allenbrand, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, good points. You stole some of the things you think this would be your line of business, right? So, what I want to say is that you saw, this was adopted first in 1999 and then it's updated in 2015. But I want to make a comment that to the staff, because all 3 of the people setting up here and your team all attended all these different meetings. Also comprehensive plan, work with your zoning boards, I don't know how you did it. It was a juggling act, but you guys were there meeting with people. Some of the cities had some questions, and I feel like this is mostly all in my district. I think the majority of it is in my district. Working directly with what you called your technical committee, working with those cities. And I'm glad you included Eudora, because we all know that's going to be developed off of 10 once all that goes through. So I think it's important to know that. I want my fellow commissioners to know how much work you guys put into this. And I also want to say HNTB, I mean, they literally went out to homes associations and met with people and came to all the meetings as well. And that means a lot to people when you're talking about their home and property and what you're doing to it. I feel that, you know, if some of these roads end up getting annexed into cities, I hope that we stand strong with helping them finance some of our roads. Again, you know, I always point out just one that always stands out is 119th Street. You've got Olathe, unincorporated, which is over 22 million, probably plus now, just that little mile of stretch. And then you go into DeSoto. And I was working with Adam Norris saying, you know, why can't we ask for help, which we can. So I think we're going to be more aggressive in getting that done. So there's no reason to kind of help with the stretch of road. And I think there was heartburn for me on 199th Street when we spent millions of dollars because that was supposed to be 4 lanes and then it was incorporated in and we got ZIP to help with the other part of the roads. So I would agree with the staff recommendation though. I think that that's something that you should do. But I want to thank you for all your work. I'm very supportive of this. I thank you for taking the extra time and meeting with the cities and the individuals. So I feel like we've got a really good core group that's definitely supporting this. So thank you.
Commissioner Burr.
Yes, I echo, thank you for the hard work done on this. Some of the other parts we'll be talking about a little bit later impact my unincorporated area a little bit more. I just have a few just technical questions. Remind me, when a road type is through a plan like this changes, does anything that's currently not in conforming with that new road type designation that's pre-existing, does that get grandfathered in? And I'm thinking, I'm on slide 7, thinking if you go to a more restrictive road type, right, then the access, the intersections or access points have to spread out. And I'm just curious, I know we've had many meetings on this, and so I apologize because I'm sure I've asked this in one-on-one meetings. I just couldn't remember, I didn't have it in my notes.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. This is Sean Penley. I can try to start and answer this and maybe see if Jeff or Jay want to correct me. There's no, with an update and when there's a change to the designation for the type of Carnap road, there's no, the grandfathering, there is no change needed at this time unless a landowner is subdividing or building a new driveway on the road. So in other words, as it is today, they'll remain the same right-of-way in front of their street. They'll keep their existing driveway. There's no changes even when we update a route. But in the future, if that owner on a road where a change is made, let's say for along 111th Street or 140th, or any of these arterial streets, if there's a change, they would have to follow the Carnap designation and the right-of-way spacing requirement at that time that they subdivide the property or build a new driveway. They just have to follow this going forward. There's no retroactive change. They're not going to cause for removal of existing driveways unless they're developing their property.
Perfect. So I own some property. I am conforming to the rules. As the rules change, I'm still conforming to the rules. But if I'm going to make a significant change, I then have to abide by whatever the current rules are.
Correct.
Okay. Then my second question was, on slide 7, help me just understand the type 3 2-lane. I'm probably using old language terminology, but when I look at those small roads above and below the 2-lane road, I kind of look at those as what I would call service roads. In a configuration like that, are we contemplating that those are pre-existing smaller lanes that once existed and we're putting in a new road, or we are allowing that type of like secondary or service road to run parallel to a type 3 2-lane road? I'm just not.
I believe those are trails and sidewalks.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That explains it then. I was like, I'm like, is that a secondary road or? Okay, great. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Myers.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't realize that either, so I'm glad you brought that up. So on this On the first recommendation from the Edgerton Road as a type 3 2-lane instead of the type 3 4-lane from 143rd to 215th Street, is it our expectation that at some time that's going to need to go to a 4-lane, or once this happens, it remains a 2-lane throughout?
That's a good question, Commissioner Sean Penley. I'll start with this. We do anticipate over time all of these rules will change as traffic increases. There's always a need to update this, and we will evaluate this as necessary, every 5 to 10 years, just depending on increase in traffic. It is possible at some point with the capacity, if traffic continues to increase, as the Transportation Connection Plan recommended, this would be ultimately, it's a 4-lane type arterial. When that happens is only dependent on as development occurs. It may be 10 years, could be 30 years. That's what we don't know. It just depends on development. Yes, at some point in time, we may need to make another recommendation, increase that to a 4-lane, a type 3 4-lane, but we'll evaluate that as needed in the future as development occurs. And we'll always want to revisit this Carnot plan as there's annexations and development and any changes in arterial roads.
I just think it's important for residents to realize that. I mean, I've had situations arise in Shawnee where, people will come forward and say, well, you never told us that Johnson Drive was going to change from a 2-lane to a 4-lane, arterial road. And of course, it was said, but not said enough. And so I think it's important for residents to know that the change can, and well, I don't want to say most likely because who knows, but likelihood of it becoming a 4-lane road, I would think would be high.
I would also add that any of these arterial roads, even the ones that are designated as type 1s, could need to be 4-laned at some point. If a development went in and all of a sudden we were seeing, huge amounts of traffic, even though the Carnot designation was type 1, we would be having to look at making that 4-lane.
If it's all right, can I build on that real quick? Why, if going to type 3, designating the right-of-way, why, and I don't want to talk about any particular instance, but why would a plan recommend a 4-lane as opposed to a 2-lane? Is it safety? Is it traffic flow? Is it for the residents of the road? Tell me what the difference is.
Typically, for capacity, you're looking at the level of service of the road. Level of service in traffic engineering is A through F. A is wide open free flow. Type F is bumper to bumper traffic. So when you're getting around that type D or D level of service, you're looking at needing to do a capacity increase. So it's typically that capacity. You can do safety improvements on 2-lane roads to improve safety without having to do that capacity. So it's really that number of vehicles and then the way the access interacts with that, driveway spacing, side road spacing, all that impacts on that capacity.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You might put it.
It's on.
Yeah, she turned it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of points, and I think you've answered this, and I'd like to continue on with the chair's questions earlier, because I was going to ask you about the fiscal note on these changes, and I understand your explanation is we really don't know. And in terms of the development timeline, it's driven by external parties trying to offer some flexibility. But the question I wanted to get to is, so are we or have we ever considered what I would call capping urban development in Johnson County? In other words, maintaining the rural nature of some part, or is the expectation that Johnson County will be fully urbanized at some point? And I'm not advocating one way or the other, but you said something, Mr. Leipzig, about the roads and how curb cuts affect traffic volume. And I understand that, but doesn't it also lend to urban sprawl because then you force people out further to get the access and develop? And is that what we want to do? I was just wondering, is that considered when you do this plan?
Thank you, Commissioner. Great question. And I don't have a direct answer for you, except that I know that, if cities like Portland, for example, Seattle have controlled, they have growth boundaries where they look at really actively trying to control sprawl and development. I think so much of it, I don't think Johnson County will, at least for the next, and there again, I could be entirely wrong, with the next 40 years ever be in I think we would have to have a lot more development than what's occurring. I mean, and that's just a product of being, I think, in the Midwest as well. Because they certainly want to, and a lot of it is governed by economics and the demand. Is people coming forward to develop their property. But I don't think this creates the tool, a very valuable tool for staff to look at how development is measured and the impacts of that development in terms of, and I'm thinking in terms of traffic counts or safety capacity. But it doesn't, and it limits it somewhat, but there are ways to work through it. We have a variety of tools available to us, but I think to control and cap that access is probably not feasible. I mean, I think so much of it is just dependent upon the growth that occurs in the county over time, but we are not at that point.
Well, I'm not advocating that, but I'm just reflecting on, and Mr. Leipzig, I'm not sure if you were here at the time, but a number of years ago, there was a debate around what was called Blue River 21, the expansion of the sewer system in southeast Johnson County. And there was one projection, sorry, this thing is driving me nuts. There was one projection in terms of whether or not growth will pay for itself. There was a fairly significant miscalculation, but then it was recalculated to be like out 50 years in order to pay for that development. And I'm just wondering if that is part of the foundational development of the CARNIP. Will growth pay for itself? And I mean, this may or may not be as expensive as sewer systems, but there are costs associated with it. So how does that work?
To answer that question, Commissioner, yes, growth pays for growth, and that premise is still active with CARNIP. Okay. I think the only kind of an extreme, and there again, an extreme example would be for a Panasonic that would come in that is such an outlier and something so unique, but most of the time development pays for development.
Theoretically.
Thank you. I have just a simple question. I had read through the public comments and letters, and I just wondered, have the residents, is there a feeling that they are okay with Edgerton Road being designated as a type 3 2-lane road? Because most of what I read was there was concern about it being a type 3 4-lane road. So do we anticipate any concerns, or will this change help to satisfy some of those concerns?
Commissioner Hanslick, I don't know the definitive answer to that question, but I will say I think that there was considerable discussion and vetting of the issues by the Planning Commission. They did when they made, I forgot the particular Planning Commission member that made the suggestion about that reduction, but it was well received by the other Planning Commission members. It was unanimous. But I think people are obviously very interested in what happens in the heart of the county. So I can't say whether they will speak against it or be in favor. I don't know, but I know it was well received by the Planning Commission. Thought that was a good compromise, a good resolution that they achieved.
I appreciate that, because that was my sense, that this was a good compromise in this situation. So thank you.
Since we're on the particular issue, Can I take a step back and ask from a staff perspective, this road in particular, Edgerton Road, why was it suggested to be a type 3 4-lane road?
I get that. If you look at back at the map, DeSoto is looking at a road north-south through the Astra Enterprise Park, and that's connecting from Evening Star over at K10 interchange down through the Astra Park and directly connecting it to Edgerton Road. And then you have the intermodal facility down south. So the modeling, it's a logical place for traffic to be going north and south with that. So that's the majority of it. There is some traffic that breaks off and goes down to all the way over to Moonlight and south down to New Century Air Center, and also Four Corners north and south picks up some of that traffic. So it's distributed across those 3 north-south roads coming down.
So to steal a phrase, what I'm hearing is that this is what we're expecting to see from a traffic perspective, given what we see at Astra Enterprise Park now. And I think we all recognize probably the development of Astra Enterprise Park is far from over. And so we anticipate that this is what is expected to happen in terms of traffic flows and demands upon our rural road network, right? And we've already discussed that a designation of a type 3 between a 2-lane and a 4-lane doesn't change the right-of-way that's required. Doesn't change that this might be a 4-lane road at the end of the day, regardless if we designate it as a type 3 2-lane road now, because that's what circumstances may require at some point in the future. I guess while I understand appeasing resident concerns at this point, to me, the idea of this plan is to be transparent, to be forthright about what's happening within our community, and to give us an idea of what we probably need to do in the future. It does not preclude the fact that this might not be necessary. There might never be anything built at Astra moving forward. But to me, I don't know that we're doing ourselves a favor by designating this at a lower level when this is what we truly expect to happen, and it doesn't put a timeline on construction. It doesn't put a cost on construction at this point. And so I hesitate to support that recommended change at this time because we're not maybe providing the most accurate viewpoint of what we see in the future, given the information that we have to date. And as information changes, plans change. But I think it's important that we plan in the best way possible for the future, given the information that we have. So, further question? I'm sorry, Commissioner Brewer, you had your hand up.
Yes. My question is a little bit piggybacking on the statements that the chair just made, and that is, when we designate a road, maybe it's on the bubble of being maybe a 2-lane road or 4-lane road, right? But maybe we choose the more modest designation. How do we address easement so that if that road either begins and matures as that type 3 2-lane and then over time matures again as that type 3 4-lane, how far out do we think about easements so that we've got the space to grow? How does that work?
I could try to start this. Maybe
So as part of the planning process, when they're approving developments, they are looking at that Carnup right away, and that becomes part of that plan for that resident or development, and it's acquired at that time. The rest of the property would be acquired during the project design process. So when we actually have a funded project that we're moving through the design process, we wouldn't necessarily acquire the Carnup right away, we would acquire what's necessary for the project at the time.
But somewhere in the documentation is an acknowledgement that that easement may go out this far, even if you're not acquiring it, or?
No.
It doesn't, okay. And then surface type, and I'm not thinking so much of a type 3 2-lane to a type 3 4-lane, but But I'm assuming a type 2 and a type 3, these arterial roads are all hard surface?
Not
road surface?
necessarily.
No, okay.
This is regardless. Now, as traffic goes up above a certain point, we would want to be transforming it over. And that's a very low threshold. That's around 400 vehicles a day that we
Right.
look at starting that process. So all these, we would be looking at transforming them from a 2-lane to a 4-lane would already be paved.
And if I could, Commissioner, add on what Jeffrey is saying, from a Carnip standpoint, that's correct. There's no, there may be arterial roads could be gravel or it could be hard surface. When it is dictated that it will be a hard surface or the type of road is at the time of development. And that's where the zoning regulations kick in. There's minimum infrastructure requirements that apply if anybody's developing anything or subdividing. They may have to pave a road if they're building a new subdivision that intersects on the arterial road in that frontage of their property. That's when the surface type, the actual hard surface comes into play is when they're developing the property.
And I appreciate that reminder, because I know you and we've had this discussion on roads in my district, and you're right, it's the traffic count perspective, and it's also how behavior on a road changes when the surface changes, so I appreciate the reminder.
Commissioner Allenbrand, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Brewer, I often, even before you came on board, was very jealous because I go out in my district and I have gravel roads, and then I go out to your district and the majority of them are paved, and I thought, how did that happen? But anyway, this is very difficult, and the reason that I'm okay in supporting Edgerton Road, this has been a very difficult, just going through this process and all the changes that are happening, and I want my fellow commissioners to know that you guys have worked in trying to meet with people to find a compromise. And some people, if you go look on Ames, which I did when I first got elected, and some of this land is surrounded by other cattle companies and other developers on the land, and they're surrounded. So you know what's going to happen eventually when the time is right. And this can be revisited. So it doesn't mean that Edgerton Road, from my understanding, if a development comes in to move forward, we can change it. I've have farmers out there that are in Edgerton and other places where they were annexed in, and then all of a sudden they have to comply with city guidelines. And so 183 acres of land, and you're 83 years old, and now you have to mow your frontage and maintain like city. And sometimes they won't give them the right, to say, okay, we'll do an exception here. Sometimes they have to comply. So it is, it's a tough situation, but I just want everybody to know how much work they've done on this. So thank you.
And I
Go
mean,
ahead, Jeff.
I think part of the planning commission's rationale is that we can revisit this. I think what they're saying is we would like to see some development starting in order to show that the model is valid and that they're looking, then they would be more comfortable with that 4-lane designation. But if I recall, that was part of that discussion.
One other quick question. I'm looking at the designations, particularly along 143rd Street. Is there it looks like we go from a 2-lane to a 4-lane to a 2-lane.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the details on that?
That would be as you're moving from west to east, there's not that much traffic coming out of Douglas County projected. And then you hit the north-south corridor coming down from K10. And that traffic is going to split. Someone's going to come down to Edgerton, some's going to turn and go east on 143rd, needing the 4 lanes until we get to, I believe it's 4 Corners, when some of that traffic peels off to the south, and then we don't need the 4 lanes anymore.
Right. Okay. And is that typical with our routes to change from 2-lane to 4-lane to 2-lane?
We actually don't have any 4-lane and unincorporated, so this would be, any of these would be our first.
Sorry. Thank you for that. But in our plan, is there similar designations of shifting back and forth between
I think that
lanes?
would be one of the few.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it stood out to me. I wasn't quite understanding.
Yeah, I mean, we could 4-lane the whole thing, but, that's a pretty large expense to do that just for uniformity. At those intersections, it's easy to add lanes and take lanes away without breaking the continuity of traffic.
Well, and as a step back anyway to the, initial point on this plan is if they're the same type 2 or type 3, regardless of their lane designation, the right-of-way designation is the same, and given what is the need when we actually get to construction, we're going to do what's right for the circumstance regardless.
Correct.
Right? Okay. I'm going to ask that we go, unless there's further questions on this in the sake of time, moving on to housing, and then we'll circle back on direction. Is that all right? Okay. Housing questions. Can you tell me a little bit about the designations? And Commissioner Ashcraft mentioned a little bit about sewers, and I know that was mentioned earlier here. How are we designating sewer to septic based on lot size? That might be a broad question.
Yes, I think I'll start, see if Jay has any additional comments. I think how we would determine the housing type is based on minimum infrastructure. So this change that we're recommending with policies and the comprehensive plan won't necessarily change what can be built. What we're saying is it would have to follow the proper land use area. So we have the urban fringe areas. So if it's an area that's in close proximity to cities and in their growth areas, that might be where you might see those additional housing types, because there probably is a better likelihood that there could be sewer capacity or infrastructure connecting those areas. That's how it would be dictated. Otherwise, it would be through our zoning regulations. So the type of housing is all dependent on the minimum infrastructure requirements. If that answers the question, I don't know, Jay, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I was just going to say the key to that really is the infrastructure, and these are comprehensive plan amendments, not zoning map amendments. So the zoning is not changed. These are generally goal statements or statements of I guess creating possible avenues for developers if they move forward. But that's apparent that they have to meet the infrastructure restrictions, whether they're on septics or sewers. If it's greater than 3 acres, it's a septic. Is that correct? Or two greater than 2 acres for a septic system. So those standards still apply. I think what it really does though is create mechanisms. So if there are some unique housing ideas that especially in the urban policy area, in the fringe areas around our cities, it would make sense to provide the additional connectivity, because within 10 years, those areas are anticipated to be annexed anyway. That's kind of the underlying assumption of the urban fringe. We call it urban, but those are the areas that are adjacent to the cities where development is imminent.
Well, and
Someday.
thank you. That's helpful. And kind of going back to a point that Commissioner Ashcraft made earlier when we were talking about fiscal note, is that if a city were to pick up certain pieces of property, they pay for infrastructure for providing city services. When we talk about expanding lot size and going to septics on certain things and locking in, that locks in a cost for the future infrastructure for the county that we need to be considerate of. And so I appreciate the opportunities for flexibility in that urban growth area, so that we can be considerate to our city partners when we're talking about their plans, which at the end of the day, part of which is beyond our control, but allowing for that to be something that's feasible for a city from an infrastructure cost perspective.
And if I could, too, Mr. Chairman, I'll add on to that. We are also looking at future updates to the comprehensive plan dealing specifically with those land use policy areas, because we know that those are changing as cities do continue to annex and and grow, it does affect the urban fringe boundaries and the rural boundaries. So we'll be updating those in the near future. We've been coordinating with the fringe area cities. We've met recently with cities of Overland Park, Olathe, Gardner, and Edgerton, and we want to continue those meetings because as they're updating their comprehensive plans, that will affect our land use policy areas as well. So we anticipate coming back in the next year or two with updates to our land use policy areas.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellenbrand.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's more of a question because there's times that I don't understand. If somebody wanted to come in and do a housing development and they wanted to stay in the unincorporated area, they just have to go into the city? I mean, I struggle with that. You know, why are we not doing some of those developments to help pay for our roads and stuff? Why do we just automatically have it go to a city and shrink the county? I struggle with that, and there's probably a simple answer, but there's such areas of where you could go out to do projects that.
Commissioner Jay Leipzig, we do have subdivisions in the county that are built. I think, you know, many of it depends on, for example, the number of houses, providing access. There's fire access to the subdivision as well. But yes, we do have those in the county, and they're although in some areas they're more limited. You know, you'll see a three lot plat, for example. You see a lot of those where it's much smaller, but we do have larger developments like that within the unincorporated area too.
So,
Do you have a follow-up?
yeah, I guess my question is, are we actively looking at possibility of doing that, or is it just something we don't do? Be more
I guess I
aggressive.
Commissioner, if I could, I'll add, we definitely do see some subdivisions. Actually, you'll be seeing in the next couple of months, you'll be seeing 2 new subdivisions with one is a 12-lot subdivision, one's a 14-lot subdivision, I believe, in the unincorporated area. It's all dependent on the density of development and what type of infrastructure is available. So as Jay mentioned, the minimum lot area we would allow in the county is 2 acres. That's because of septic system requirements. Generally, when a development gets to a density that they want to build suburban or urban type density, they have to go in the city because they have to meet those infrastructure requirements. Generally, it's regarding sewer. And so when the sanitary sewer is there, it's usually that they have to fall within that utility provider's range. So if it's whether it's JCW or the respective city, it gets to a certain level. If they're on sanitary sewer, that's when they have to be in the city because they can't be in the county as a general rule because most unincorporated areas do not have sanitary sewer. So we're limited in what we can allow in the unincorporated area because of septic. There are some small pockets of areas where there are sanitary sewers available in the county, but again, they can only be developed in those areas that meet that. As a general rule, though, it goes into cities when you get to the sanitary sewer.
So could I just ask a follow-up? It's more question. So that we really couldn't afford to do it if there was a big enough development with enough land, that's why they need to go into the city. You know, never mind. I'll catch offline. Maybe you can help me a little bit understand with. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'd be happy to talk more about that as well, because there's a variety of mechanisms, including impact fees or excise taxes are the other major components that cities have that the county does not collect those. And that makes a huge impact on the subdivision developments too.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you. You know, as we're talking about this, I can't help but reflect on a few years ago when this board made the decision to move housing services under planning, and there was a lot of discussion at that time. But one of the reasons for doing that is to look at housing in a more holistic way across the county. And I know Mr. Leipzig and I had a number of conversations around that, including what can be done to allow for more housing types in the unincorporated area. So I'm very happy to see these considerations because it's exactly why we had made that decision at that point. And I really appreciate Mr. Leipzig's leadership in his attention to what can be done to provide more options for housing choices in the unincorporated area. So thank you for that. And I'm very glad to see this being discussed.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back a little bit to what Commissioner Allenbrand was asking, maybe frame it a little differently. There's a natural tension between urban and rural forces, okay? And I'm trying to understand if this plan and the work that we do supports the development of urban areas or supports the development and maintenance of rural areas, or if it's our intent to have kind of a laissez-faire attitude. It will develop in its own due course, and your efforts are intended to be neutral. What's the underlying thought process here? Because we see it from time to time. I mean, it's a natural argument.
Thank you, Commissioner. Another great question philosophically. I think the key to development really is overall it's connectivity and doing something that compatible might be too strong of a word, but providing if you have adjacent land types that don't completely inhibit each other. And we deal with that on a daily basis where we're trying to balance the needs of the property owner with the needs that are stipulated in our regulations, and trying to find that medium ground to make the development work. But I think a lot of it, when you look at a development, you want to ensure that there's adequate infrastructure, and infrastructure would be, access to water, sewers, roadway infrastructure. So looking at all of those things, and if it doesn't exist, creating the maximum the developer can do it, with the idea though that there might be future connectivity 10 years down the road, or if it's annexed or whatever. So we're always balancing those type of things with connectivity and thinking about it in the future. I wouldn't say it's laissez-faire. We try to certainly allow developers the much flexibility as we can, and to provide the mechanism to enable that flexibility. But so much of it is economics and the long-term timing of the project, and how imminent the future annexation might be. But I think having regulated growth and balanced and orderly growth, such as what Carnap does, is really part of the reason why Johnson County is such a great community, a great area, because we've been very conscientious about that development and creating these sound development patterns that are consistent with what is happening with a city when they annex in. So we're not creating small one acre parcels, for example, that are very difficult for a city to annex in, or it doesn't connect with their existing street pattern. So we're always looking for those kind of things together holistically.
Well, I look forward to future debate.
I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off. And Mr. Norris.
Thank you. Real quick. We're talking about how we interface with growth and the rural, kind of maintaining rural character in the county, right? I want to go back and remember in the focus areas that the board adopted, there is a objective here about evaluating and implementing infrastructure improvements that promote organized and sustainable development, right? So the Carnap plan, these zoning code updates, those are all infrastructure related items that facilitate organized growth, right? The staff here, we're often challenged with that balance between respecting and honoring the rural character of the county and respecting property rights. At the same day, we're often interacting with cities that take issue or concern with some of the policies that we implement that prohibit the organized growth and development in the county. So we often walk that fine line trying to strike that balance, because there are certainly decisions that have been made and can be made in the future if we're not smart about it, that will prohibit growth, organized growth and development in the county. And that is a detriment to everybody in the county, all cities and Johnson County. We don't want to be necessarily in the city business 10 years from now, right? So we have to be very mindful of that in all these decisions and planning documents that we have.
Thank you. Commissioner Burr.
So I want to reflect on some of the conversation that's been occurring, and one of the questions around, what do we have, and do we have examples? As the gentleman sitting at the table, and as Mr. Norris knows, because we've had a lot of conversation, District 3 really does have a number of different types of examples. Some were in place years before we went into really formal policy making, right, for parcel sizes and how development occurred. And some of it were experiments in policies in the 80s around certain types of benefit districts and such. So Commissioner Allenbrand, you noted that you see a lot more maybe hard surface roads in southeastern unincorporated. That can be very confusing for a resident because you can go down a roadway and see different types of road along the same section. Like I have soft shoulders, now I have curbs and gutters, now I'm back to short, soft shoulders. One section of the road may be gravel, and some of that is indicative of going in and out of some city boundaries, and some of that is indicative of changing policy and understanding of costs we have to carry going forward. I do have an area that's been developed that's unincorporated that does have sewer tie-in, right? But once that happened, then now we carry the maintenance of that in a go-forward way. But to what Commissioner Hanslake noted about liking to see more housing type, I agree with you, because I think over time, this policy on managing septic and how much septic we want to see go in, and so having that minimum lot size of 2 acres gives an impression that anything going out in the unincorporated area is going to be very large scale single-family homes or a few, or large acreages with larger scale homes. And so just that policy alone can create a dynamic where that's what's going to happen, right? And we really want a dynamic that also respects the different housing types that we need in the community. And I would say for Southeast Johnson County, the different types of housing types that are in that community, are in the unincorporated area. I have a lot of smaller lot, modest homes that I want to see continue, because maintaining existent modest homes is the lowest hanging fruit when we talk about attainable housing. And I've interacted with residents who've moved from other parts of the county into those homes because they were the homes that were attainable within their budgets. So what I like about when I look at Chapter 2, page 20 in the draft plan, you have a bulleted list and you have a greater variety of housing types and price ranges as one of the aspirational goals. What I get a little confused about is we think about what's appropriate and where on the land within the unincorporated area, and we're cognizant that we might see more smaller lots, higher density, different housing types, like even small density multifamily owner occupied in fringe areas abutting cities, but they only get there if they can do sewer, and they only get there if when that land is identified for that housing type, if the owner of that property wants to be annexed. That's my question. When you think about the appropriate housing and where geographically in the unincorporated area, one of the comments that was made is those fringe areas may be more appropriate for more modest size, higher density developments with, that could be, like I said, either, like low density multifamily owner occupied. Is it because you're priming that land to be able to tie in, but it won't be able to tie in unless it goes into into a city?
I'll see if I can answer the question with a thought about how we work, it ties into our zoning regulations. So this, again, the policies here are general goals and aspirational objectives, like Jay had mentioned. Where it dictates what type and density of actual residential development depends on the infrastructure that's there. So it depends on the level of infrastructure allowed by sewer generally. So there are minimum infrastructure requirements for each zoning type and development type in our zoning regulations. This just allows for different housing types, but at the end of the day, what can actually be built in any particular property will depend on what infrastructure is there. And we have to coordinate with the other departments such as Johnson County Environmental,
Right.
Health Department
Health,
of Environment, work with Environmental Division on septic requirements, so they have to meet those. It is possible that somebody could build a low density attached housing and still meet the septic requirements, but it's a case by case basis. It really depends on if they meet that minimum infrastructure.
So those areas within the unincorporated portion of District 3 that have sewer, which I do, I have a section, right, that has sewer. If that were, because there's, space to the south of that area, if that were to continue to be developed into another phase because sewer exists there, are they able to tie into that sewer then?
I believe so, yes. If they can work through either Johnson County wastewater or whatever the provider is, and they can meet those requirements for sanitary sewer for the density of development, yes, it is possible to develop at the density that they could be allowed. We're proposing, as part of our zoning regulations update, we are proposing new zoning districts that'll allow for some of that flexibility. Right now, in the current regulations, it's still the minimum 2 acres for residential, but we're proposing, we do have currently a multifamily residential district that would allow something lower than that. But with the new update to our regulations, I think it'll accommodate that better and address that a little bit better. But that's the zoning regulations that would address that.
Commissioner Brewer, one other additional item too that we have is with, there's also dry sewers. I don't know if you've heard of those, but oftentimes those are used, although they can be a bit tricky because if the development is not timed properly and a dry sewer is put in after, and Susan Picaric is not here, but after, say, 5 years, that system might be obsolete. It may not be functioning anymore. So we have to be very careful with that. But there is the availability for dry sewers as well in certain areas. And a lot of that is up to the staff recommendation, the developer, the long-term connectivity, and what's either, for example, north or south of the property that could possibly connect to too. So there's a lot of factors to that as well.
And then finally, just because some of my fellow commissioners may not be aware of this, I mean, I've got some properties still on cistern.
Yeah, right.
So, which is a whole nother interesting.
Yep.
So, thank you.
I want to ask a procedural question. Given that this came to us from the Planning Commission with a recommendation and understanding the timelines that we have, if we disagree with any of the recommendations from the Planning Commission, is this an up-down where we have to kick it back to the Planning Commission with recommendations like a zoning decision, or is this something that we can move forward tomorrow with a recommendation that is not 100% aligned with the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try to answer it. I'll defer to Peg Trent. Normally, the items are up, down. In other words, we have a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The Board of County Commissioners can either accept that Planning Commission recommendation or remand it back to the Planning Commission. But I believe in this case, since it hasn't gone before you as an official before for action in front of the board, it could possibly be sent back to the Planning Commission for additional discussion. Right, correct, okay.
And I do believe that is correct. If the board wishes to change any of the recommendations as recommended by the Planning Commission, I believe it would require a remand similar to a land use action to the zoning boards. I believe any changes to the Planning Commission recommendation can be sent back. Then whatever comes back the next time the board could choose to agree with that change or change it at the second review.
Okay, so here's going to be my recommendation. I'm happy for folks to amend it or not. I think there were two recommendations from the planning commission that were discussed. Frankly, I don't agree with either of them, and I'm not sure that everybody is with me on one of them, but at least on the second one regarding the additional study of alternatives, that's premature. And I think staff doesn't recommend that, and I think the board's going to be with me on that one. Frankly, so that being the case, I also believe in transparency and this being a planning document. So I would be in favor of the designation of Edgerton Road as a type 3 4-lane road. But I'm not sure if the whole board is with me on that one. But I'm going to move that we direct staff to remand this to the Planning Commission with the recommendation to remove the recommendation regarding the additional study of alternative routes, as well as the designation of Edgerton Road, allowing somebody to amend me if they should so choose regarding Edgerton Road. Commissioner Allenbrand?
Well, Chair, what I was going to say is I would rather you just go, if we're going to send it back, just send it back with both. And I'll second it.
Okay, so it's been
We're
moved
going to
and
send it back. Let's just-
seconded. Commissioner Hanslick?
I agree in regard to the removing the recommendation for the additional study, but I'm comfortable with it being, with Edgerton Road being a type 3 2-lane route, since that is the recommendation of the Planning Commission. I don't see a need to have it, change it to the 4-lane.
Procedurally, are
Yes.
we good?
Yes.
No, okay. So did you want to amend that? Would it be right to amend the recommendation?
Yes, to direct staff to bring this to the planning commission with your recommendations. You're not voting up or down right now.
Correct.
You're just telling them what your thoughts are and giving them advance to do it. But you could, if they didn't do it, still take it up, then back down and then back up again, so it'll go a few times. If that makes sense.
It does. How clear do we need to be on a recommendation specifically
Well,
on?
they'll have the record.
They'll have the record and the
Yes,
notes.
Yes.
So if I could just amend the motion to remand to the planning commission and leave it at
Consistent
that.
with your discussion.
Consistent with the discussion,
Yes.
understanding people's positions on this are known in the record. Is that fair enough? Okay. Is there further discussion at this time? Okay, then I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
The motion then
The motion is to remand to the planning commission.
both items.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Commissioner Faust. Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner Brewer.
Brewer, aye.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
Chairman Kelly.
Aye. That's 7 in favor, none against. Is that consistent with your count?
It is.
Okay, very good. Do we want to take a quick break or is
Yes.
everybody? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're in recess. Thanks. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue on with our committee of the whole at this time for a presentation regarding the zoning board consolidation. Mr. Leipzig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Leipzig, Planning Housing Community Development Director. I'm joined this afternoon by Sean Penley, our Deputy Director of Planning. This is a follow-up to an item presented to you back on November the 20th at a committee of the whole we had. We discussed the idea of a consolidation of our two zoning boards into one zoning board, and the direction was to get additional input from those zoning boards and then report back to you. And so that essentially is the purpose of what today's discussion will be. So summary of the previous discussion is to, as I said, it was presented to you on November 20th, and we're wanted to get additional comments from both the East and the West consolidated zoning boards and the Planning Commission. So in summary, we made presentations to the East Consolidated Zoning Board on December 3rd, the Planning Commission on December 16th, and the West Consolidated Zoning Board on December 17th. So it was a busy month presenting to those groups, and then presenting it to you again today. Factors for consolidation is kind of a review from our previous discussion. Jurisdiction land area continues to shrink for the unincorporated areas of Johnson County. Number of applications to the East Consolidated Zoning Board and the West Consolidated Zoning Board are generally equal following consolidation in 2023. We've been through, I believe, 8 consolidations over the years. The most recent one was in 2023. We do anticipate a reduction in applications to the zoning boards due to the update in regulations, allowing more efficient process with administrative approval by staff. I think this is a key component because as we move forward with our new subdivision regulations, which will be hopefully before you in June or July, probably July, that will have a huge impact probably on the number of applications because it makes things more administratively efficient, and it's more kind of in terms of best practices for land use and land use development. We also expect a decline or shrinking pool of potential board members able to serve on those zoning boards. So additional comments from the East Consolidated Zoning Board, the West Consolidated Zoning Board and Planning Commission. I'm going to kind of walk through these that are on the slide, and then I wanted to inform this body that there were several additional comments that staff had received from members of the West Consolidated Zoning Board that brought some things to my attention. I wanted to make sure we put those before you as well. So the ensuring equal representation throughout the unincorporated area. West Consolidated Zoning Board suggested a smaller board size, preferably 7 members rather than 9. The East Consolidated Zoning Board said no concerns with a 9-member board, ensuring equal representation across the county. They had actually talked about, one of the suggestions they mentioned was having 4 members appointed by the 6th District Commissioner and 4 by the 3rd and 1 by the chair. So a 9-member board, but 4, 4, and 1. The last bullet, smaller size may be easier to reach a quorum. That's true when you think about it very on a fundamental level, but if you think about proportionally with numbers, it's not true. It actually is more difficult to achieve a quorum with a smaller board size than it is with a larger. And I can go through that in more detail if you'd like, but it's between a quorum of 4 members out of 7 versus 5 out of 9. It's easier to get a quorum with a 9-member board. The other thing I wanted to point out, some additional concerns. The East Zoning Board, I mentioned the different representation, the 4 members from the 3rd, 4 members from the 6th, and 1 from the chair. They prefer to have the zoning board meetings held in townships for any controversial applications rather than in the county administration building. That was brought up by a couple of those zoning board members. Interesting comment. And also the West Consolidated Zoning Board, they had concerns that because the West area is so much larger than the east, they should have greater representation. That was brought up a couple of times, but if you recall, the west has a larger land area, but the east is more populated. So in my mind, those kind of balance each other out, but that concern was suggested that it's a larger area. Concerns with that the BOCC chair having 3 nominations was too many appointments. If you recall, we had suggested a 9-member board, 3 from the east, 3 from the west, and 3 from the chair. We don't want to overlook the value in the current zoning boards. They believe that the zoning boards really are the ears and the voices for those in the unincorporated area, and it's their avenue to make sure that those development proposals are heard and thoroughly vetted out. So there were a lot of concerns from the West Zoning Board about that, and they feel that they know their area best, so that's why they wanted to look at having a possibility of larger representation on the West Zoning Board. And as I mentioned, they had mentioned a smaller zoning board size rather than a 9-member board. They had suggested a 7. Thank you, Sean. So in a quick summary, so we're providing 2 options here just to get the conversation started. We have the, as we suggested at our committee of the whole on the 20th, we have 3rd district 3 members, 6th district would be 3 members, and the chair would appoint 3 members. And there again, all of these people would be from the unincorporated area. That's option 1, and then option 2 is in deference to the suggestion from the West Zoning Board with a 7-member consolidated zoning board, the 3rd district having 3 members, 6th district 3 members, and the chair having 1 member, and all of those folks being in the unincorporated area of the county. Just a quick update on our slide for the Planning Commission. Whether it's a 7-member board or a 9-member board, the Planning Commission representation would remain the same. That part of it still, it's fairly simple. I can go into that in more detail if you'd like, but I really wanted to kind of explain provide the 2 recommendations to you as a basis to start the discussion and see what you all think about that. The next steps would be to, if you do decide to move forward with the consolidation, we would have a public hearing before this body on February 12th would be the next date when we can have a public hearing. And then going through the new appointment process for the new members, and we'll get establish the new zoning board as soon as possible. There's still some discussion internally from our staff in terms of when that would be, whether that could be in April, but we're going to try our best. If you decide to move forward in that direction, we'll do it as quickly as we can. We do have new applications coming forward, and we have to make sure that we provide adequate notification for those the applications that we currently have to make sure they're heard in a timely manner. So we have to balance that as well. But that concludes my presentation, and I will open up for any questions you might have.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm probably one of the ones that have been pushing this along just because I've taken a look with staff of, from the time I got elected, of overages that we have that are basically staff. You look at what your workloads are and what you're doing, it's just not sustainable. Plus, just having so many different meetings and then covering the same things. To be honest, if you look at, if there wasn't a state statute that needed to be changed, I'd be pushing for just going to a planning commission, and let me tell you why. And I don't know what happened. I think I have 3 more phone calls on my West Zoning Board, but after I talked to them, they understood where I was coming from. Because first of all, we have townships that we can't even get people to, to run for those positions, and some of them are gonna be, probably need to go away, and we're looking at that as well. And there isn't a place to even hold a meeting, and that wouldn't make sense, because this is also countywide. But, you know, so I don't wanna ramble on, but, you know, the cost of what it's costing, you know, as far as staff time, you know, and, the meetings and the stuff that you're going to, and plus what's happening as far as those people that are trying to add a building on, or just the process they go through. So I recommended the 9-member board because I agree that there are more population in the other district, but my district right now is getting ready to explode. There's some areas in my district that overlaps with you know, in the other, Commissioner Brewer's district. I don't feel that having the chair have only one, I feel like that it could end up being a cutthroat. I'm sorry, I just think that he is elected countywide, so I am in support of a 9-member consolidated zoning. I'm gonna continue to push for, to go to just a planning commission, because if you look at it, there's areas of my district that's in Commissioner Brewer's district, which is 3. Commissioner Myers has, I always call it meat in the game, because you have an area where it's touched. Commissioner Ashcraft does. So I feel like to be more cost effective, and I know the numbers from when we consolidated from down to 4 to 2, this is just gonna help. And I wished I would have put a number together, but I would say probably somewhere between the meetings being cut back and you go to one, it's well over 100,000, I would suspect, staff hours and stuff. But I'm in support, and again, I've got 3 more phone calls to make, but once I talked, I don't know what happened, but anyway, I think, I'm hoping that we move forward on this and get a vote to do that, to move it forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Brewer.
So when all vacancies are filled today on an East Zoning Board or a West Zoning Board, help me remember, is that 5 or 7?
There are 7 members currently on the East Zoning Board as well as the West Zoning Board, and there are 12 members on the Planning Commission.
On the Planning Commission. That's what I thought I thought it was 7. And so when I think about this, because I know in chatting with some folks both on the East and a gentleman out of the West, you know, their concern was finding enough people, right, and then sustaining a quorum. Well, today, if we looked at just those 2 bodies together, East and West Zoning has 14 people. So I feel confident we can find 9 people. And to speak to your note, you know, that's only requiring us to achieve 1 more body for a quorum, but it gives us 2 more additional people to make sure we achieve a quorum. And I know when we talked about consolidation, you know, there was a number of factors that you illuminated in your presentation. And then another factor was that when we looked at reasons for cancellation, it was often as much that I didn't have an application to review on a given month as I didn't have a quorum in order to review that application. So I too am supportive of a 9-member consolidated zoning board with both District 3 and 6, each appointing 3 members and the chair appointing 3 members. I think to address the concerns that were raised, I know in East Zoning, Consolidated Zoning Board, of what if you end up with a lopsided configuration and then you don't have equal consideration of different development projects that are going on in the different areas of the geographic unincorporated area. The notation you have on slide 6 for the chair's appointments, that a minimum, you know, at least 1 member from the 3rd district, 1 member from the 6th district, I think addresses that concern. So I'm very much in support of that. And I don't think I have any further questions. I think the folks both in the East and West and the Planning Commission were pretty consistent with what their input was. And I didn't hear from East absolutely no for consolidation. I think everybody, and I think the conversation from that East Zoning Board bears out that they saw the logic in having this consolidation move forward. And I appreciate, because I know that Commissioner Allenbrand's been working on this for a few years to get us to this point. So I think we're ready to take that next step.
Commissioner Fast.
Yeah, why, I know Shawnee County, they have one planning commission. They don't have separate zoning boards. Cities, it's one. You have you have a planning commission, then a BZA. Why does Johnson County have this model? Why don't we just have one entity?
Commissioner, thank you for the question. I'm going to defer that to our legal counsel, can provide a better explanation, but I will say it is confusing for the applicants to say, if you're going before an application to be reviewed, it goes to the zoning board, because they automatically think it's the planning commission. And so, the system we have right now is somewhat confusing for people.
So Chair, if I may, Chair and Commissioners, briefly, under the state statute, because we are an urban area, we have a specific statute that's unique to us being an urban county. And as a result of the urban county, we have more restrictions about the zoning and the planning commission composition and qualifications. So just to give you an idea of the difference, in zoning, they're allowed up to 9 members.
Yes.
In planning commission, it can be up to 12 members. And so depending upon how many zoning boards you have, you're to have representation from each of those zoning boards, and this is all outlined in the statute. If at some point, as Commissioner Allenbrand has suggested, there is a combination to get aligned with the other communities and other counties, because we're unique with an urban, to have one planning commission and zoning. If you have a planning commission right now comprised of 12, you probably want one of a zoning of 9 members, because if you're going to consolidate it, you probably are going to do the 9. Right now, we have on the planning commission 9 individuals, because it's required under the statute, from the unincorporated area. And you have elected from back in 23, when we reorganized the PC, the Planning Commission, to have 3 from the incorporated areas, which is smart because we have the annexation of those communities coming in. So you at the time decided you wanted that representation. That's how we distributed, if you recall, those appointments of the Planning Commission. So on the zoning right now, if you were to go with the 7, just so you know, so that would be a 4 is a majority, you are recommending 2 out of the 4 would need to be on your planning, which is a lot of meetings for people to start attending. If we do 5, you have more people to pick from who can attend those meetings. So it's getting to be, there's a lot of meetings that an individual will be required to attend, and of the Planning Commission and the zoning and the representation. All of the zoning are from the unincorporated areas. So that's where you've come to it. But to answer your question, is because it's unique to urban area, and that's what we are and why we have that set up.
I have one more question. So BZA, do we still have that? And so these individuals on this, there's so many of them are on the BZA, or tell me how that.
The BZA, those folks are appointed by their district. That is a little different, but we still have a Board of Zoning Appeals.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few incidental questions. I'd be interested in seeing your cost-benefit analysis of this consolidation, and we can discuss that offline. Clarify for me on slide 6 of the 9, Chair, 3 members, at least 1 from 3 and 1 from 6. So the third one is from either or anywhere in the county?
It could really be anywhere in the county, frankly.
Okay, well, that wasn't clear on that, so very good. And then,
It has to be from the unincorporated.
Yeah, in the unincorporated area. They call it.
It can be from anywhere in the unincorporated.
okay, well, that makes sense, but it wasn't clear. Okay. Then on slide 7, if I can jump to the Planning Commission. And I have not talked to Commissioner Myers about this, and I have no objection for a 5th District nominee, but we realize that the number of households, at least in the 5th District, and I'm suspecting in the 2nd District, is pretty small. And getting someone to volunteer, I mean, I don't think we're going to dragoon anyone to serve on this. So if we can't find anybody, kind of like the trustees issue, what would we do?
I'm looking at our legal counsel.
I can take that. So Chair and Commissioners, what we could do when we reconfigure the zoning, we're going to have to amend the Planning Commission too because of the additional, how this is being laid out. So what I would recommend, we could, if that's your desire, to say, if it's not within your 2nd and 5th, anywhere in the unincorporated. They just have to be in the unincorporated.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm more than willing to try to find someone, but just so we have that flexibility. Commissioner Myers, does that make sense? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, Commissioner Ashcraft, you asked one of the questions I was going to ask about the chair's nominations. My question is about the Planning Commission. So would this change mean that we would each have to go ahead and reappoint either existing nominee or someone different? That would it be similar to what we've done before with the other boards and commissions where we had to kind of pretend like we're starting all over again?
Commissioner Hensick, yes, we would bring forward a reorganization resolution for you, and there's a couple of things, not only for this new consolidated zoning board, but also some minor text changes in the Planning Commission bylaws as well. So everything is affected, but we will like to do that all at once.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess my question would be to legal and more of a legislative. I guess in my mind that I was thinking, because Johnson County looks different than when I grew up here. I mean, it's totally, so when all this went into play, it was a total different. And so I guess I was thinking that if eventually we went to a planning commission, that there would be, I'm just going to pick one in the 1st and 4th district, they have a nominee from the city. I guess, would they have to have them from the unincorporated area? So as they move forward, since they wouldn't have anybody living in there? I mean, because to me, it seems like, as we move forward, we need to really look at the planning commission and how that's set up.
Chair and Commissioners, you can, if there is legislative change, you can address all of that in the same statute. Right now, it does require that 9, if you have 12, you have to have 9 members that are in the unincorporated. So that could be addressed if you do consolidate both the planning and zoning.
Since I'm not seeing further hands at this time, do we want to move to direct staff to bring back an item for us for the 9-member zoning board consolidation as presented on November 20th?
With the flexibility on 2 and 5. Or no, that's planning.
That's
planning. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, you can add that to the motion if you so choose.
Sure.
That's what
So I will so move as amended by Commissioner Ashcraft, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Hanslick. Are there any questions at this time? Commissioner Burr?
I just want to make sure what I'm understanding what I'm voting on. There's a recommendation not only for the zoning board, but also maybe to go forward with the planning commission recommendation as well, to put them together as a motion. Is that what the motion, and was that the motion that was just made and seconded?
Yes.
It's later in the afternoon. My brain's moving slower than you guys, so thank you.
Okay.
Chair, just for clarification, what we would bring back is a separate resolution just to amend the planning commission to revise the qualifications. That's all we're doing, I don't believe it would require much more than that. So you're not reorganizing like you would with this.
Correct. Everybody understand?
Yep.
All right, then I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner Brewer.
Brewer, aye.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand. Chairman Kelly.
Aye, that's 7 in favor and none against. Is that consistent with your count?
It is.
Very good, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Everybody have a good evening.